Hello and welcome to Türkiye Talks. This week we are going to talk about upcoming Turkish elections. Both presidential and general elections will be held early in this year. I am joined by Kadir Ustun as usual. Kadir, how are you?
I'm good, Bora. How are you?
Thank you very much. There was an article in Washington Post. Probably also read it all. You are aware of that. It talks about upcoming elections, and it says the world's most important election in 2023 will be in Turkey, together with Nigeria and Pakistan's elections. I'd like to talk a little bit about this article because Washington Post is an important media outlet. But as a journalist, I saw lots of biased points here. I'd like to share it with you and with our viewers, if you allow me. First of all, it talks about the impact of the elections will shape, the outcome will shape geopolitical and economic calculations in Washington and Moscow, as well as capitals across Europe, the Middle East, Central Asia, and Africa. Turkey, now we call it Turkey, but Washington Post keeps saying Turkey, may be a middle power, but the great powers have a stake in its elections. I think everybody would agree with that point. I don't know what is your take on it. I'll go further, but let's start with this paragraph if you'd like to comment about it. Of course, Turkey is a very important player in this region, and probably whatever Turkey does or Turkey's decisions has impact on regional politics, right, Kadir?
That's right, Bora. I mean, this is a very important election. Of course, every election is very important, and every time we talk about critical turning points, etc. But this time around, in May or June, there will be an election, especially the presidential election. I think the fact that Turkey is under President Erdogan has been such a strong actor in the region, has been so relevant in issues from, Ukraine, Russia, energy issues, Syria, Caucasus, Middle East, North Africa. We can go on and on. I mean, migration issue in Europe. President Erdogan has led the country in a certain way, with a certain attitude, with the kind of self-confidence that many countries don't have these days. And these are very turbulent times, and these are very unpredictable times. So in that sense, if there were result where President Erdogan ends up being in the opposition, the new leadership, whoever they are, it's going to take a while for them to adjust and, get a grasp of all these complicated issues. President Erdogan has been the leader of the country for 2 decades. And, foreign policy, especially since 2016 failed coup attempt, has taken a different direction. And after the pandemic, Turkey has been trying to reconcile with some of the countries in the region. So there are many, I think, critical dimensions of Turkish foreign policy that touch upon European security, energy dimension, NATO enlargement, relations with Russia, and then relations with China. So these are very important things from a Washington perspective. And I think that's why Washington Post is naming it the most important election this year. So, I mean, broadly, I would agree with that assessment. Of course, some of the things you point out, some of the, let's say prejudicial, adjectives or how they frame the issue, that's problematic. But you're a journalist, so you know better than me how these things work.
Yeah, think this is very important because most of the decision makers in the West, in the US, in Western capitals, if they don't know much about Turkey, they get their opinion, and their opinions will be shaped by these articles. And as I told you, I saw some criticisms very biased, because especially when you look at the wording of how Turkish foreign policy was dealt by President Erdogan is a little bit misleading. For example, he used Babi Gosh. He uses a word to describe Erdogan's worldview as radical. So it's a very strong word. Why is it radical? There is no explanation to that, but he says in the Washington Post article, it reads, he has undermined NATO's security by acquiring missile defense system from Russia, but this doesn't talk about the United States didn't provide Turkey the Patriots when Turkey asked for it, and then talks about Erdogan again frustrated the alliance by blocking the membership of Sweden and Finland without giving the pretext why Turkey took this decision, and still Turkey actually has not blocked it for good. Still the talks are going on, and it doesn't talk about Turkey's concerns about the PKK. And everybody saw a couple weeks ago what happened in France, how PKK terror group members and sympathizers burned Paris, actually, literally. So it doesn't talk about that. Imagine you're a decision maker in Europe and you read about it and you think, okay, Erdogan is blocking NATO enlargement without giving any reason. So the guy must be crazy, they will think. But there is a real issue behind it. And also repeatedly threatened to flood Europe with refugees, and doesn't talk about Turkey's, again, great efforts to host 6 million refugees. Remember, since 2012, Turkey is hosting millions of refugees without any support from any government. Although the European Union promised a lot of financial aid and other stuff, it didn't work. And also talking about the bellicose rhetoric towards Greece, and doesn't mention any of the Greek violations of Turkish territorial waters and also other issues. So finally, I think this is also interesting. Ankara's relations with Washington have grown strained to the point where top Turkish officials routinely accuse the US of backing a coup against Erdogan and complicity with terrorist groups. So it was not only a coup attempt against Erdogan, it was against Turkish state and Turkish public. And you know what happened in the 15th of July. So they are undermining the facts. And after all this, they label Erdogan's worldview as radical. So it's very unfair and I think very problematic. I don't think it's fair journalism as well.
I mean, you just outlined every kind of, let's say, problematic framing of issues that are very, very important issues for the sake of an article to, I don't know, like, it's ignoring, it's overlooking a lot of the nuances and the back and forth. Like, by purchasing, S-400s and then paying for it politically in terms of being pushed out of the F-35 system, this is, at the end of the day, it's a sovereign Turkish national decision. And it's a arms purchase issue. It's a bilateral defense issue between the United States and Turkey. So saying that undermines Western security is problematic, to say the least. What did did Turkey use these systems against the West? No. How? It's not clear how Turkey undermined Western security. Turkey has been signing pretty much everything that NATO, agrees upon. In Brussels, they announced the 2030 vision state paper. Turkey has a signature under that. Turkey has signatures in all NATO decisions. With regard to Sweden and Finland, Turkey had some hesitation, and they expressed it. And then these countries said they were willing to work with Turkey about this. Just last week, I think Sweden said that they can't meet some of the criteria that Turkey is laying before them. So it may ultimately not work out, but sometimes there is a bit of a bargaining back and forth. I don't know ultimately what's going to happen, but Sweden and Finland's admission into the NATO has to be done through unanimous decision, right? So if one of the allies has concerns, that's a legitimate thing. And how is that somehow undermining NATO? How is that weakening NATO? NATO has a broad number of issues that it needs to address. And Finland and Sweden's application came at a time when Ukraine was fighting for its life. Not all countries, not all NATO countries jumped at this and said, we have to admit them urgently, etc. Broadly, United States agrees that it would strengthen the alliance. But they're not lobbying on behalf of them. They're not fighting for them to be included very quickly. So bottom line is, this is a much more complicated story than what these op-eds or news pieces make it out to be. Like you said, PKK is a national security concern for Turkey. It's not just a policy difference or some sort of matter difference about approach. These guys are committed to their cause, and they've been fighting Turkey for 40 years. So you can't expect Turkey to ignore that threat. And, and it's a threat to Europe, like you said. We saw that in France. And with respect to refugees, I don't think the, West or the United States have a lot to say against Turkey. Just like you said, there are millions of them. They've already, they're in some of the, there's no such thing as being in a good position as a refugee. At the end of the day, you're a refugee. You would prefer to be in your own country, safe and working. But at the end of, in comparative terms, Turkey has been hosting refugees in a way that they're most comfortable and welcome, despite a lot of anti-refugee sentiment that will also have an impact on the upcoming elections. And with respect to Greece, again, there's a lot of back and forth there. Turkey and Greece actually started last year in, February? President Erdogan met Mitsotakis. They started out really well, actually. Then Mitsotakis came to Washington and lobbied against Turkey on an issue that was a bilateral issue, right? F-16, again, arms purchases. So that wasn't, Greece is a NATO ally too. So lobbying against another NATO ally's national security, national defense capacity, that wasn't really smart. And that's just one of the things about this issue. Finally, accusing, United States of coup. Coup has not been understood outside Turkey that well. That's to say the least. The coup attempt has been deeply traumatic. It's it's a very particular challenge for Turkey, Turkey's bureaucracy, Turkey's military, and it's been decades that this organization has been recruiting people using the resources of the government, resources of the civil society for their own political purposes. They finally ended up trying to do a coup in Turkey. And, it's a very unique challenge. I don't think it's understood outside the country all that well, except for some exceptions. So sorry for going, one by one based on what you said, but this is, of course, we are focusing on this article not to attack a journalist. We are doing this to highlight some of these, tropes, how these frameworks are disseminated so easily and without paying much attention to the complexity of the policy issues that underlie it.
Yeah, of course, this analyst is not the only one. There is a tendency in the Western media to portray Turkey and Turkey's president in a certain way, which is very superficial and very actually unfair. For example, in this article and in many other articles, especially in the US, I see that they talk about Turkey's accusation of the US of supporting a terror group, but they don't give the name, the PKK or the PKK's affiliation with the YPG and the PYD, because in this case, the American taxpayer and other countries' citizens may start question their government's policy. So it's in a way hiding the facts, and it is not fair journalism, of course. Let's leave the article aside and talk about the upcoming elections. Let's go a little bit into detail, because in this article and in other media networks, we see the expectations and also the people outside of Turkey are trying to understand what's going on. The opposition's candidate is not clear yet. There is a table of 6 people, even not outside of Turkey, but even in Turkey, there are people who don't get what's going on, what is the aim of this table of 6, who will be the candidate. But whatever the decision of the opposition and the result of the elections, probably President Erdogan has built a Turkish foreign policy understanding, a new security understanding. Do you think this will change after the elections, even in case there is a change in the government? What would you like to say about this?
Well, like you said, Bora, this table of 6 was set up after President Erdogan made some moves about the economy, because last year, emerging out of the pandemic, Turkish economy was having serious difficulties. Let's not forget, Turkey provided free care, free diagnosis, free healthcare for millions of people who suffered from the COVID-19 virus. And then, all economies have been struggling with serious economic challenges, including inflation, supply chain issues, etc. And Turkey have been affected. Turkish economy was not doing that well over the summer. And the opposition felt like it was basically a done deal. This kind of economic issues, people, complaining constantly about inflation and other things, were going to result in a change of government, defeat of President Erdogan. But as, political scientists would tell you, the weaknesses of the ruling parties are not usually enough for a change of government. So President Erdogan made some moves in terms of creating, financial mechanisms to support the Turkish lira. And then all of a sudden, the mood in the country kind of changed. At least that's what I've observed from outside. All of a sudden, a lot of people were saying basically, these problems are still going to be solved only by President Erdogan. At least this was the perfect perspective of a lot of people. So when President Erdogan's approval numbers climbed back up again, I think Table of Six thought that, okay, they need a more coordinated effort, and they need more than just the difficulties in economy to rely on to be, to change the government. We'll see. I mean, there's 4 or 5 months maybe until the elections. The latest it can be done is June 18th, I believe. There's a chance it will be done in May. If there's a change of government, of course, I think a lot of things would change, because President Erdogan has been a powerful figure in Turkish politics. He's led the foreign policy choices in a certain way, with a certain, he's done a lot of leader diplomacy. He's seen so many American presidents. He's been, I don't know, like, he's served longer than even Putin and others, right? So it's a leadership matters in foreign policy. It's not the only thing, obviously, but it matters a lot. And which kind of, leader is going to replace President Erdogan, that will have certainly a bearing on the Turkish foreign policy. Some national security issues won't change. I think, YPG in northern Syria, PKK in northern Iraq, how they, cooperate, other, interests throughout the region, national security interests won't change. So the security establishment will have to do certain things the same way, or in a different form, in a different attitude, but some things won't change, but a lot will change, because, President Erdogan is, let's admit it, I mean, he's a visionary politician. He has goals, and he's not scared of talking about them openly. So it's a very different, I think, Turkish foreign policy we might see if that were to happen. But of course, there's a lot of time for elections. The mood has certainly changed. Like you said, Table of Six doesn't have a candidate yet. They don't have a clear program yet. It's not even clear if they're actually going to be creating an election, like, in what form they're entering the election. Are they going to, I mean, it's, in all likelihood, they will act together, but it's not entirely clear, because with respect to the candidacy, with respect to some issues like, Kurdish identity, some other issues, they haven't been able to talk to the HDP, the Kurdish, party that garners something like 10% of the vote. So there's a lot of issues that the Table of Six has to figure out, and we don't have a sort of clear picture where Erdogan is going to run on this platform against this candidate. We don't have that picture still, although we only have 4 or 5 months left. So it's going to be very interesting, but like what we discussed at the beginning, I think it's going to be very consequential for the region overall. This is a very interesting time, but maybe you can talk about the domestic sort of perspective on this. I mean, I closely follow the Turkish papers, obviously, TV And lately, I feel like the opposition, lately, the ruling party hasn't really had to, let's say, attack the opposition that strongly. The opposition is having enough troubles within themselves, and then it's making the news.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe we should say before I start, in Turkey, although outside of Turkey, many people talk about the freedom of expression is not strong. Journalists cannot speak as they wish, which is not the case. The opposition parties, they have very strong media networks which work for them, actually. Very big television networks, important papers, and day by night, they criticize the government very harshly. They criticize President Erdogan for hours, the commentators. So it's very lively, actually. And as you said, they have a lot of trouble because they still don't have a candidate, and the system has changed. Now Turkey has a presidential system in which you cannot have coalitions in the presidency. But right now, the table of six, their disagreements, their inability to provide a candidate is being watched by Turkish society, and especially people in our age, in our generation. We have seen lots of coalitions, short-lived governments, a lot of political crises, military coups, etc. So the political instability created great chaos, especially in 90s and before that. So most people, although there are problems as in any other country and system, of course, I think there is kind of support to this political stability. So the table of six, as they cannot provide a candidate for months, and the disagreements are deep because, as you mentioned, it's not part of the six, but HDP is supporting this table of six from outside, which is politically affiliated with the PKK. This is the idea of many people in Turkey. So they are in kind of an alliance with the nationalists. So there are the secular party is the CHP, the Republican People's Party. They are strongly secular, but you have parties from political Islamic background, like Saadet Party, and there are two leaders from former Justice and Development, AJP. So it's a very difficult match to work with, and because of this, there is most people in Turkey, even in opposition, when you watch opposition media, they are also criticizing that. So it's very difficult for this political entity to come up with a candidate and challenge President Erdogan, who is still the strongest candidate, and his approval ratings is getting higher despite the economic problems and many other issues. So it's still very difficult for the opposition to challenge president. I think this is one of the reasons. I don't know how do you see that? Yeah.
Well, there are some structural issues. When we say table of six, these are six political parties, but I believe three of them haven't entered an election. And the opinion polls are showing them at some of them 0.5% or 1%, 1.5%, and then two larger parties in this equation, CHP, garners about 25-26% maybe. And then E party, the good party as it is called, shows something like 13 maybe percent to 16. It goes up and down. But so there are those two dominant strong parties, but then table of six, past week, for instance, they made some announcements about basically deciding by consensus, like the EU. That means, these parties with 1% will have the same say as the 25%. So it wasn't clear. I could have understood it if they said, it's just a temporary arrangement. We are going to move to parliamentary system. The president is going to be just a caretaker. That wouldn't have made a lot of sense either, because, they're going to get millions and millions of votes, and, there will be a mandate. They need to run the government in the meantime before they can push the country back towards parliamentary system. The merits of that is something else. It could be debated separately, but the point is the table of six does not have a common agenda, common front still. They have agreement on some basic things, but part of the reason they couldn't engage the HDP is that they're not on the same page about what to do with that. Because, like you said, HDP is basically the political arm of PKK in the eyes of most people in Turkey. So engaging them can be politically troublesome. So they're having a hard time with that, because that party garners still 10%, 10 to 12% maybe of the votes. Without them, the opposition cannot really win. And it's not clear if they can win with them. So it's a double-edged sword. And, and on a number of issues, like if you were to, you and I could not probably agree that, okay, this is what the table of six says about foreign policy or cultural or policy, or, what to do with education, what to do with. So it's not, there's a lot of uncertainty. And then the electorate is seeing President Erdogan responding on a daily basis to, let's say, increasing the salaries, fighting inflation, etc. So the audiences are asking, so what is the table of six offering? It doesn't mean it's a sure bet for anybody. I mean, elections are always difficult. Elections are always unpredictable. Neither the government nor the opposition can assume that they're gonna win it easily. So it's going to be very interesting couple of months. But I think, even like you said, the opposition themselves, or pro-opposition journalists or opinion makers on TVs and in their columns, they're actually attacking the opposition the most, because they feel like they're running out of time, and there needs to be the candidate determined, and then common agenda announced, and then go into the election season. So, we might get more clarity at the end of the month, but for now, it's not certain. What's certain, like we said, it's a very crucial election for a number of reasons.
Definitely, as you said, it will be very important, as many people in the world also admits and acknowledge that these elections will be crucial, not for Turkey only, but for the rest of the region and the world probably. Kadir, thank you very much for your program. Thank you. So with this, we come to the end of this show. Hope to see you next time.